This is Ken Uger. This is video 13 of several. I don't know how many we're going to do for the West Virginia public school systems on the Andover control systems. This one we're going to discuss how to create objects, which includes the inputs, the points, schedules, and such. These things will be needed if you're going to create programming or graphics, reports, or anything like that. We're not going to be discussing how the backnet and stuff works, so if you need that, we'll have to get to that later. But the objects, Andover names these things objects, just kind of generic term for everything. Graphics is an object, schedules are objects, inputs are objects, outputs are objects. That's just their terminology. We're going to create inputs and outputs, and numerics, and some schedules. And so I'll show you how those work. I have a controller here that is just a basic. The only thing I have on it right now is just two inputs. And what we're going to do, we'll start with inputs. I have three inputs. I know on this controller, in order for you to add inputs or outputs, the IO list on the controller, you have to know what type of controller you have and its capacity. I know this is an Infinity TCX 850. And if you go to that controller and you do an edit, you look at the model number. If you don't know the input and output list, IO list on that, you can look that up on Andover's website. But I know this one has capability of 4 universal inputs and 4 digital outputs. If we discuss, let's discuss inputs for now. If I wanted to add another input, first of all, I've got to know where to put it. If you have existing I/O already, you can do a right click in this white area here, do a view, and it's going to come up with those. These are live values. This is a list view. And the channels is what you want to look for. You have channels, which is channel 1, 2, and 3. Channel is the same thing as the position of the input or output on that controller. Channel 1 is input 1. Channel 2 is input 2. Channel 3 is input 3. So they just go in that order. Since I have the capability of 4 inputs for this unit, I have a spare one that I can use. So I know that. So to create one, I'll come over here in this white section and do a right click with your mouse, and you're going to click this new Infinity input. Create a new input. I'm going to call it fan status. I can spell ATUS. Fan status. Okay. Because these points report back their value to the controller, the value is what they are telling the controller that their values are. Digital's points are on and off, 0 or 1. Analog points will be 0 to 100 or any other value, not 0 or 1 or on or off. So you don't have to fool with this value. The units, what do you want that? It's not really important exactly unless you really need them, but they're not something you have to have. On this, because I know it's going to be a digital point, I'm going to call this off and on, off/on. The next thing you can do is put a description. Again, it's not required, but it's something, if you want somebody else to know what you're doing, it's something to put in there. And the last thing is it is enabled, and that's basically what you want. The next tab is settings. This is where you're going to have to know what type of point you want to set up. You have you have a bunch of selections. You don't use them all the time. I usually use either voltage, digital, or AC temperature. I've never used the rest of these. If you have a humidity sensor or there's some other things that give you a 0 to 10 volt signal or 0 to 5 volt signal. CO2 sensors, CO sensors will do that. They would be voltages. A room temperature, if you want it in degrees Fahrenheit, and it is a type 3 10K ohm thermistor, you will choose the ACC temp degree F, and that should be fine for most all these thermistors that you get. I don't use counter so much. I know what it's for, but we'll get into that later. But if it's just an on and off point, you will choose digital. Okay? I know this is where you want to, channel is where you want to put it. I know channel 1 is already used, channel 2 is already used, 3 is used. I'm going to put this on channel 4. Okay? So that is absolutely necessary. If you have channel 0, it's not going to register anywhere. There is no channel 0 for inputs or outputs. So if you see channel 0, something was not loaded correctly, or it's not going to do anything. The formatting is for a digital point is $, and some pound signs. So that's going to show you on or off. You can have it if you want 0 or 1. You can have just the number signs. That would show you on or off for 0 or 1. But because we want a fan status, it's going to be typically a on or off sign. Okay. Conversions, there's not going to be conversions for a digital point. There's no triggers for a digital point. If you want it to alarm, this is where you would do that, and we'll get into alarms later. The only other thing I use a lot is the logs. And this is where you would set how many intervals of this do you want to see. If you want to see one value for every hour of a day, you would want, I want 24 entries to represent one for each hour. You will choose either an instantaneous or an average. I usually use the average. What that does, it looks at over that 1 hour period, which is what we're going to choose here in a second. What is the average over that period? If you choose instantaneous, it's going to give you the value, what it is right at that point, no matter what it was any other time during that hour. Okay, but we're going to do an average. And we want this to be at 1 hour intervals. If I chose one there on the days and 0 there, that would give me for 24 days I would have the average of that value over the 24-hour period. That's not going to represent very well for this purpose, but if I want something to average 24 hours every hour, this is what you set your log up. If you want it for 2 days, you change that to 48 hours. 48 intervals. So that's going to be 48 times this is 48 hours. 2 days. Then you would say apply. And that is all you have to do to set up an input. Now once you save it, it'll come up and it'll be in your list of inputs for that controller. If you do a view of those, here you are. You now have 1, 2, 3, 4 inputs on there. Now you can see that's off because there's nothing on this point that's going to turn it on or off, so I can't really physically do anything to it. But if the contact was made, if it were shorted together, the value of that fan status would come on. Okay, now let's do let's look at how we did the cooler. This will show you how to do a temperature sensor. It is reporting 37 degrees. The units are degrees Fahrenheit. The description is a cooler temperature, and it is enabled. The settings, like we said, for any temperature is going to be ACC degrees Fahrenheit. If you want it in degrees Celsius, you just change that to Celsius. But I don't know of any schools that's going to do that. It is the first input, channel 1. So if you look on the controller, the first device on the input side is this cooler temperature sensor. The format is to a 10th degree. I'll show you how that works. If you change the format to this like this, this is reading down to 100ths place, 1000ths place below there. We'll say that. And we'll look at this. If you look at this now, the cooler temperature is 36.260 degrees. Your thermistors are not that accurate, so what you're doing is you're just limiting that to the significant figures that you really need. So tenths is a maximum you want to go with it in the sensors. Cooler. Let's put that back. If you want to change it, you want to round it up to the nearest whole degree. You take out the decimal or anything. You don't have to have the period there. If you do that, it's only going to show you to the nearest degree what that is going to be. So now it's just 36 degrees. But we want a little accuracy to it, so we'll put that back. That's what the format's for. And we want all this stuff to look the same. Okay. Now let's look at outputs. You can see that there are no outputs assigned to this controller. The controller name is Kitchen. There are some histories that we are accumulating. There are inputs that we just assigned. There are numerics. Numerics are just non-physical points. Basically, set points, run hours. Is it occupied? Is it not occupied? So it's non-physical points. It's not inputs. It's not an output. So to create something that is not there yet, you go to the name of the controller. That brings up everything that's in there. We're going to come over here in the white space. Do a right click with your mouse and do I'm not trying to get new. Go down to infinity output. Here it wants, what do you want to call that, the output? I'm going to call it fan, because we created a fan status before. The value is nothing you have to worry about. Again, you want to, what's the units of this point? It's going to be off or on or off, it wouldn't matter. This is going to be the fan command. It is on, or it is enabled. We go to settings. This is where we are going to determine what type of output it is. Since this can only be a digital outputs on this type of controller, I'm going to have to change it to digital. It always defaults to voltage. I'm going to put it on the first output. So I'm going to change that to channel 1. I'm going to make this, the format is on or off, so I'm going to change it to $sign and 3 pound signs. That's going to show up as on or off. Okay. There are no conversions. There are no triggers. There are no alarms. If we want the same log as the other one, we'll put 24 hours average at 1 hour apiece. And we'll apply. Now you'll see that this tab came up under the kitchen controller. If you go there it is. It's going to come up. If we want another output, we can go through that same process. New infinity output. I'm going to call this compressor. It's going to be off or on. Settings, I'm going to make this a digital point because it's still the same controller. I'm going to put this on channel 2. Again, I'm going to make this on and off point. And if I wanted to log it, I could. We'll go 24 hours on average at 1 hour apiece. And there we have 2 outputs. Now to make these things do something, if you had something physically connected to them correctly, and you turned this on, applied it, and refreshed, that should physically make the point come on. That should make continuity between the common and the output terminal, whatever that is. It's just a switch. That's really all it is. And if you turn it off, it should go off. Same thing with the compressor. But until you have a program telling these things what to do, they're not going to do anything without you telling them what to do. A quicker way to make something like this happen is if I had a whole bunch of points, if I wanted to create 2 more points, I could highlight both of these, drag these to the name of that controller. It says, do you want to copy these? I'll say yes. So it just kind of duplicated them. It just renamed them to compressor 1 and fan 1. We're not going to keep those. But if you view that, you'll see that it has assigned those channel 0. Like we said, nothing's going to work on channel 0. Because it was already occupied, channel 1 and channel 2, it didn't know what to do with it. So it didn't really, it just assigned them channel 0. But if I wanted to make these something, I could rename, let's rename it something. We'll say it's heat. Alright? Just for simplicity's sakes. And I'll edit it. The settings are going to be digital. See, everything transfers when you copy those, except for the channel. Since I have channel 1 and channel 2 assigned, I'll make this one channel 3. Channel 3. The logs are still there. The alarms, had I changed any of the conversions or triggers or alarms, they would also have been there too. Now if I say apply, that's another point. That's output that's on there. If I wanted to make this one a damper, I'd rename it. Outside air damper. I would edit it. Still has a, well, descriptions need to be changed, don't they? So that would be needed to be changed if you just copy them. The settings. If this damper was just a 2-position damper, open or closed, it would be the last output on my list. Okay, well. This one, an 851, those are tri-state, meaning you can drop, if it is typically for a damper or some type of modulation where you turn it on, it drives it one place, you turn it off, it stops it. If you want to drive it the opposite way, you set it to -1. But they call that a tri-state point. So it's got 1 off and -1 states, hence the word tri-state. So if you say it, or let's see, it's got logs, it's still set up the same way. So I've assigned 4 outputs here. They're all digital outputs. If I do a view, you'll see that they've come up 1, 2, 3, 4. They're in order of their name, so not in the channel list. So that's how you do outputs. All right, let's make a couple of numerics. We go to the Numerics tab. Here's what is existing. If you do a view, it's just going to give you the values. There's no channels associated with the numerics because they're not physical points. If I want to create one that is, we'll say a set point. We'll just say set point. I want a new infinity numeric. I will call it set point. I'll create it. And unlike the outputs or inputs, you do need to assign a value to this. If I want my room temperature to start out at 72 degrees, I need to put that value in there. Whatever value you want that to be, put that there. If you want it to be what units is degree F, you can type in degree F, which will show up. I usually like to do hold down the alternate key 0176. That puts the degree sign there. It's kind of shorter, less clutter on the graphic. That is Alt 0176 while holding down the Alt key. That's an ASCII code if you want to look that up. You can put the description. The other thing you really need to do is check the set point box. If you don't check the set point box and you reload this, it's going to say a not set value because it doesn't know what to go to. If you check the set point, the last time this thing was flashed or backed up, that's what that 72 is going to be. If you changed it to 75 last time, then backed it up, it's going to be 75. And again, your format, if you want it to be 72.0 degrees, you need to format it with 4 pound signs and a period, then another pound sign to represent the tenths of a degree. If you wanted it to be 72.5 degrees, that's what you'd have to do. There's no configuration as far as channels and stuff. You can do alarms and logs. Same thing with the logs. If you want 24 hours average every hour, and that's what that will be. So now it's 72.0. That's how that works. If you want to do a digital point, digital numeric, like occupied or not occupied, new infinity, new occupied, create, it'll be off, and the units will be off or on. You can do on or off, it doesn't matter what you want there. Put a description in there. Make it a set point. If you got a program that's going to make this do something, you don't have to check the set point. But like the room temperature set point, you usually don't have a program setting that value. So since this is going to be an on or off point, I'm going to put a $sign and 3 pound signs, and I'm not going to do any logs for that. I'll say apply, and there is occupied. If you view those, they'll come up in your list. There's occupied and set point. So now you can write programs with those values. If you had a program that you wanted to create, we'll get into programming later. This is where you go to your programming tab, new Infinity program, and you would name something fan program. That would allow you to create a program. write a program. With those same values that you just made. It's not a great program. But that would control your input, your output, based upon the inputs you just made. You made the fan input, output, and then you have the set point input numeric that you had. And if you had a room temperature sensor, that would be something you'd put in there. Like I say, it's not really going to control anything. Just showing you that it can create a program. That's how you do that. The other thing you would do, you can create a schedule. You can create a lot of things. If you go to new, so you can create graphics, groups, which are your histories, date and times, which are these type values, date and time when things happen, events happen. Functions, I'm not going to get into right now. The inputs that we just did, the numerics we just did, outputs we just did. Programs, the list view is what we bring up when we do a view, like we were doing. There's a video of that earlier. The program, I don't know what the difference between that program and that program is. But to do a schedule, if you want to do a scheduled, make a schedule, you would select that, name it. Here is a blank schedule. So really the only thing you do with this is go to configuration to tell what it's going to do. This says turns on the fan, or I should say controls fan command. Controls occupied. We're going to make it control the occupied that we created. If we had a date time set up for occupancy time, or times it turns on or times it turns off, we put that there, but we didn't make one of those yet. But the only thing you really need to make this happen is this occupancy point. And if we go back, this is the point that this schedule is going to turn on and off. So it's going to turn on and off without any other programming, this occupied. Right now, let's do a standard day just to make it work. 8 to 5. Okay, it should work today. Apply. Download events. So it is active, which means that point should be on. It's going to stay on. It's going to go off today at 5 o'clock. It's going to come back on tomorrow at 8 o'clock. So that's all we had to do to create a schedule. And there's a whole video on scheduling earlier. I don't know what video number it is, but if you want to do scheduling. But that's how you would make a schedule for something. Then you got to have programming to make other things work, but that's how you make a schedule. If you wanted to make the gym units run differently than the cafeteria units, or you wanted a separate section to run, that's how you create a schedule. So there we've created some points and some objects. We'll get into some graphics later. It'll probably be really soon. So anyway, if you have any questions, let me know. And that's really all I have for today. All right, thanks.